Israel is braced for revenge after it killed the head of Hezbollah, with Iran's supreme leader saying the death of Hassan Nasrallah would not go unavenged. But Benjamin Netanyahu is defiant, saying the assassination would change the balance of power in the Middle East. And there are signs there is more Israeli military action against Hezbollah to come, with tanks gathering on the Lebanon border and more reserve soldiers being mobilised. Well, in Lebanon, tens of thousands of people have fled their homes as Israeli airstrikes continue. Let's speak to Middle East correspondent Stephanie Glinski, who's in Beirut. Stephanie, good morning to you. It's been good to catch up with you in recent days. Just bring us up to date with what's been happening overnight.
Yeah, of course, there's been more strikes across Lebanon and more people are fleeing. What we've seen over the last days, ever since that strike on Nasrallah on Friday, is that more and more people are leaving. More people want to get out of the danger zone, and that means traveling north of Beirut to the northern parts of Lebanon. It's been an absolute chaos here. We're having people sleeping on the street, children sleeping on the pavement. They don't have blankets, they don't have pillows, and people are cramming whatever they could get from their houses into their cars, strapping it to the roofs, into the boots, and then they're out of the city. People are very, very worried of what's to come here in Lebanon.
And what sort of support is there from authorities to help these people? Is there any?
Of course, there's a lot of international and also local organizations who are helping, who are passing out food, who are providing shelter. The government has also opened up schools, universities, any space that is available to people. People are cramming into university dorms, into elementary schools. They are sleeping in the classrooms. Mattresses are being provided. So yes, there is support, but also Lebanon is completely overwhelmed with the situation. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of people fleeing. We've already seen a wave of people come from southern Lebanon, and now we're seeing more and more people across the capital, Beirut, also leaving their homes. And I'm not just talking about Dahir, the area that has been largely targeted and where we've also seen the strike on Nasrallah. I'm talking about the entire city. People do not feel safe anymore. People are very, very concerned with what is happening. They think the future is very, very uncertain and they want to get out.
So you've been out speaking to people. What was their reaction, well, initially to the news that Hassan Nasrallah had been killed by an Israeli airstrike?
When Israel announced the news yesterday, that was about 11 a.m. time, Beirut time, and people dismissed that as enemy propaganda. They told me nobody believed it. People said they're waiting for a statement from Hezbollah, and that statement then indeed came, of course, around 2:30 in the afternoon, and that's when people reacted. And the reactions were vast. A lot of people throughout the city started crying, weeping. People went outside, shooting guns into the air, angry, calling for revenge. People drove around the city with Hezbollah flags. So there was a lot of reaction among people. I saw a man who collapsed. He couldn't bear the news. A lot of people were very, very scared and worried and sad. And that's not just because everybody in Lebanon is supportive of Hezbollah, but of course, Hezbollah held a lot of power, not just militarily, but also politically, socially, also offering services, in parts of the city, in parts of the country. So the reactions were very, very strong. And there was a lot of sadness, a lot of weeping on the streets. People were coming out, they were coming together. But that only happened late in the afternoon when Hezbollah made their announcement that Nasrallah had indeed been killed.
Obviously, one of the major concerns now is an even further escalation in the region, with other countries being pulled in, obviously waiting to see what the reaction will be from Iran, which of course has backed Hezbollah for so many years. Do you get a sense that this could actually strengthen support for Hezbollah in Lebanon, or do people feel that they have been let down? I mean, we spoke to some of our correspondents who'd covered the Middle East for many years yesterday, and they were completely, perplexed really at why the senior leadership of Hezbollah were all together in a room in this area. For many people, they felt that was an error of judgment, and there was maybe a sense that Hezbollah felt that Israel would never actually target those people. Do some people feel that Hezbollah have made mistakes and feel a little bit let down by them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm hearing too. And what I've heard from a lot of people is that this has been the biggest humiliation, not just to Hezbollah, but also to Lebanon. So people are asking these questions. They are wondering why the Hezbollah leadership was all together. I mean, we've had so many attacks and strikes on Hezbollah senior leaders in the past weeks. And people are wondering how this is possible. And they are, of course, now very, very concerned that this could be escalating into a wider conflict across the region. People in Lebanon tell me they do not want that. And they want peace, they want stability for their country. But at the same time, people tell me that they, at this point, don't even know if this is possible. They're worried, but like I said, they also say this is a very, very humiliating feat for Hezbollah and for the entire Lebanon. Lebanon is now starting a period of 3 days of mourning that's starting tomorrow. The reactions throughout the country were extremely strong. And yes, people are sad, but people are also wondering, how did this happen? And what does this mean for our future?
Stephanie, thank you as ever for updating us there. That is Stephanie Glinski, who is in Beirut. She's a Middle East correspondent. Throughout the course of the morning, we're going to be trying to kind of assess what happens next. So it certainly looks like Israel has no intention for now of de-escalating this situation. No desire for a ceasefire, as we reported there. Tanks and soldiers gathering on the border. Some suggestions that there could still be some kind of ground invasion into Lebanon. We also, of course, waiting for Iran's reaction. But there are other countries involved in this. There have been statements from Turkey, from Iraq, the Houthis in Lebanon, Syria. There's so many countries here that could get pulled into this. So how high is the threat now across the wider Middle East? Let's speak to Mehran Kamrava, who is Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So first of all, let's begin as we sort of discuss all of the individual countries around the region. Let's begin with Iran. Obviously, there has been this statement by the spiritual leader of Iran. But what response would you expect?
I think we will hear more rhetoric coming out of Tehran, but no tangible action. The Iranians have already said that Hezbollah goes beyond an individual leader and that this is a movement, an ideological movement, a resistance movement, and that Nasrallah can be replaced. So although Tehran's bombastic rhetoric is unlikely to change, I don't anticipate any tangible actions coming out of Tehran in light of Nasrallah's killing.
Which I guess we should be grateful for at this stage when we're thinking about the stability or lack of it in the region.
Well, lack of stability. I don't think there's much room for optimism anywhere in the Middle East. The tragic war in Gaza goes unabated. Now we have the tragedy of Lebanon, a state that has always been on the verge of implosion and a state where central state services, garbage collection, simple policing, delivery of electricity and other utilities is conspicuously absent oftentimes. And so, unfortunately, this is a region that is likely to experience turmoil and tragedy for some time to come.
Let's talk about some of the other countries in the region. Turkey, President Erdogan condemned Israel's attacks, criticising what he called an Israeli policy of genocide, occupation and invasion. He's calling for the UN Security Council to intervene. What's Turkey's role in this?
Well, Turkey is also a major power in the Middle East. It's a major diplomatic power, a member of NATO, a heavyweight, not just in the region, but also in relation to the world and Europe. But again, Turkey or anyone else can condemn Israeli action. But I think we see an Israel that has been empowered, emboldened, feels confident. Netanyahu's popularity has once again recovered domestically. And so I don't anticipate any meaningful change on the ground in terms of the unfolding tragedies, first in Gaza and now in Lebanon.
Let's talk about the Houthis in Yemen, because we know that obviously they have had a huge impact over the last year or so on shipping. Do we expect any more response from the Houthis?
That's an excellent question, and we'll have to wait and see what happens over the next couple of days. I think everyone was surprised when the Houthis fired a hypersonic missile at Tel Aviv that got through all sorts of Israeli defenses, went from Yemen to Israel in 11 minutes in terms of its range. And so are the Houthis in a position to so-called retaliate? And I think that would let us know if the so-called axis of resistance remains robust, or is it recalibrating and trying to figure out how to regroup in light of the loss of a central figure like Hassan Nasrallah.
Just explain for people who aren't familiar with the axis of resistance, who they are, who those groups are that come together.
Well, Axis of Resistance is a loose group, a loose coalition, with Iran being the central node, if you will, of non-state actors, a number of non-state actors that have they have been trying to challenge the regional order. And in many ways, they are Iran's forward defense. And I think it's important to remember that Iran has used this axis of resistance, whether they're militias in Iraq or Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen, as a deterrent force against Israel, rather than as an offensive set of groups. And so I think that's why we're not likely to see major action by Iran, because it wants to make sure that that axis of resistance is not further eroded in terms of its abilities to act as a potential deterrent against an Israeli attack on Iran, on Iranian soil.
And yet we saw yesterday, didn't we, from Iraq, that an alliance of Iraqi Shia militias known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq said they'd carried out some drone attacks on Israel and the occupied Golan Heights.
Exactly. Wars never end for soldiers, and wars especially don't end for non-state militias, for militias and non-state actors. And so I think we're likely to see these kinds of low-intensity attacks. We'll have to wait and see how Hezbollah does anything. If it shows any willingness to retaliate. Nasrallah had said that Hezbollah will retaliate at a time of its own choosing. It will not take the bait that has been laid for it by Israel. And so I think we're likely to see attacks by Iraqi militias, probably the Houthis. But in terms of actual conditions changing on the ground, I don't anticipate major changes.
So how would you sum up the situation we're in right now? How dangerous is it compared to previous situations and previous escalations in the Middle East?
We're at a perilous point in the Middle East. Let's make no mistake about it. The danger of escalation is ever present. And so we're at a perilous point in the Middle East.